think next week is our Worth lecture. Next week, I think.
Now, what is that?
Oh, it's, they have.
I'm Sharon Costco, but everybody here knows me. And I haven't seen them in over 3 years.
Wow.
We shut down March 11th, was the second Wednesday, March 2020, and I feel like we're rebuilding. And I run this other project, as you recall, Art Deco in the alley, Art in the alley. And we shut down the last newspaper in Delray. They went out of business. We were on the front page. So we're now calling it Renaissance in the alley, the rebirth of creativity. Because everything's just starting over. Why am I wearing a mask? Linda Stabile on our board of directors got COVID. So I'm a little nervous. So forgive me, but I'm going to keep the mask on today. It is wonderful. We have Ryan Warren in the house on video. We have a guest speaker who came up from Miami Beach. No, not the restaurant. The Miami Design Preservation League, also known as the MDPL, Miami Design Preservation League. And that's really how I got started. You've all heard the story a million times with Barbara Bayer Capitan, who discovered the Art Deco modern sculpture in Miami. So you have two papers on your seat, maybe. One, of course, says things to look for in Art Deco architecture, which are all experts already, and a membership application. We'd love to have a membership. It's only $35. I've never raised it in a very long time. 2 for $60. We really do appreciate it. We appreciate the donation, even though it's a free lecture. You're not obligated. Education is what's important to me, and preservation. Education and preservation. So, what are we here for today? We're having a World Congress. What the heck is that? It started 30 years ago in Miami with Barbara Capitan. I was there. I'm in Florida 37 years from Brooklyn, New York. And she said, Sharon Costco, you will start the Art Deco Society in the Palm Beaches. Of course, the rest is history. But because of that, she said, well, let's get all these Art Deco societies from all over the world together and meet. And they all came to Miami, and they had people from Australia and California and from all over the world. And she said, let's every 2 years, let's meet all over the world. So of course it costs a lot of money. I went a few times. I went to New York. I went to Cuba, Havana. You've seen the lecture. I went to Paris and Perpignan. I've been to Egypt. I've been Buenos Aires right before COVID was the last World Congress. It was scheduled in 2021 to go to Singapore. Canceled. So there has not been a World Congress since, it was actually 2019. 2019 November was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And now it's coming to Palm Beach County and Miami Beach. Jack Jackson's coming up here to tell you all about it. Next Wednesday, second Wednesday of March, I'll be speaking, showing you the Palm Beach County portion. Okay, but Jack is here to talk about, we're here to talk about the whole thing. Just get everybody all excited that people will come from all over the world to see the Art Deco in Miami, in Central Florida, and the Palm Beaches. Any questions so far? Okay, with that, we're going to have Jack. I met Jack in Buenos Aires. He's from Miami. I had to meet him in Buenos Aires. And we became friends. For those of you who came on the last bus trip, it was 2020, January, and Jack joined us for lunch at the Turkish restaurant. And, we made a presentation to the board. It's called ICADS, International Coalition of Art Deco Societies, to hold the 16th World Congress on ArtDeco.com. We were accepted, and we've been working on this for 2 years. I can't believe it's 2023 now, I can't believe it's February. Can't believe it's Art Deco second Wednesday. But we have been working on this, and they're coming April 28th, 29th, and 30th to the pond, which is, now we have a volunteer committee, some of you are on that. We've been meeting in Boynton Beach at the Panera Bread, because we're gonna need all kinds of help. And if you'd like to do that, just send me an email. I'd love to be on that committee, and that would be great. And I thank those of you who are here on the committee. It is a volunteer. And anyway, Jack is this great guy. He knows everything. He's the chairman of the board of the Miami Design Preservation League. Daniel Serraldo, who's the executive director, could not be here tonight. We will mention his name. And with that, I give you Jack Johnson.
Thank you, Sharon. I have a three-part lecture for you tonight. I'm going to first talk about why is it that Art Deco architecture in South Florida is different from Art Deco architecture in other cities around the world. And the second thing I'm going to talk about is how is it that Miami Beach became the first city in the world to have an Art Deco preservation movement. And then I'm going to talk about the World Congress on Art Deco, which is the main reason why I'm here. First, why is Art Deco architecture in South Florida different? Well, in the early 20th century, Los Angeles was becoming the film capital of the world. New York was becoming the economic capital of the world. Chicago was booming because of the Erie Canal. Detroit was becoming the center of automobile manufacture. Tulsa was growing because of the oil industry. Seattle was becoming a major trade center with Asia, as was San Francisco, which of course had already had its gold rush. And Miami Beach was a swamp. There were less than 50 people living in Miami Beach at the turn of the 20th century. There were fewer than 500 people living in Miami. Today it's a metropolitan area of 2.5 million people. But at the time, everything was small. Everything was built by chance. What we call vernacular architecture. It was built by the people who were going to use it. The city of Miami Beach wasn't incorporated until 1915. The first roads were built in 1913. The first causeway between Miami and Miami Beach was built in 1919. The population grew from 644 in 1920, this is the population of Miami Beach, to about 15,000 in 1925. So a period of 5 years. The predominant architectural style in Miami Beach was the Mediterranean Revival style. You have a lot of that here in Palm Beach County. In fact, there's a lot of it throughout South Florida. Throughout the United States, for that matter. It had been popularized by various international expositions. But then, in 1926, a major hurricane struck directly South Beach. And destroyed much of what had been built up to that time, because the construction wasn't all that great. That hurricane, if it were to strike today, would be considered a Category 4 hurricane. So it was really powerful, and it did strike directly on South Beach. It brought the Depression to Miami Beach early. But Miami Beach also recovered from the Depression early. And the reason for that was tourism. Between 1930 and 1940, the population of Miami Beach doubled to 28,000 people. Miami Beach had annual visitors of 75,000 people by that time, by 1940. So there was a lot of rebuilding being done in Miami Beach and throughout South Florida in the 1930s, in particular the late 1930s. Well, all those other cities that I mentioned were building Art Deco buildings in the 20th century. I mean in the 1920s. So buildings like Rockefeller Center, like the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building. Those were built at a time when Art Deco was much more decorative, much more elaborate style. Whereas in Miami Beach, it was a much simpler architectural style, because by the late 30s, the architecture had become less decorative, more geometric, more streamlined. So let's take a look at some of those, some of the buildings in Miami Beach that you'll be seeing if you come to see us for the World Congress. These are, the first ones I'm going to show you are all Ocean Drive hotels. As you look at them, what is similar about all these hotels? Pardon me?
Flat roofs.
Flat roofs, yes. What else?
That paper.
Eyebrows, yes. Yeah. What about the streamlined? Absolutely. Yes. Geometric, yes.
Looks like a
What about the form of the buildings? They're all 2 or 3 story buildings. They're human-sized buildings rather than skyscrapers. So the same is true of many of the Art Deco buildings here in the Palm Beaches and elsewhere in South Florida. So that's one of the things that makes Art Deco architecture in South Florida unique. Also, these buildings were built primarily by relatively small investors. These weren't, these weren't built by chain hotels. None of them were built by Hilton or Marriott or any of those other companies. They were built by relatively small investors who saw an opportunity to make money off of the booming tourism in Miami Beach. And so they would build these small hotels. The average size of a hotel at the time was only about 50 rooms. And in addition to that, the decorative elements of these hotels tended to reflect the weather, the climate here. We call it tropical deco, and the seaside nature of Miami Beach and similar communities. And the apartment buildings that were built behind those hotels, that is to say toward the west, also tended to be more human scale. 2 or 3 stories, geometric in form, quite beautiful, but nonetheless relatively simple. And here you see how the decorative elements in these buildings tended to reflect the seaside nature of Miami Beach. This beautiful carved concrete element beside the entrance to this building depicts underwater scenes. There are fish in there and seaweed. It's quite unique. The same building has this wave pattern along the top of the parapet. I presume you all know what a parapet is, but maybe you don't. The parapet is the extension of the wall above the roof line of the building. The wave pattern is very common in Miami Beach architecture. Here are more examples. Here's another Miami Beach building, which is more likely to be similar to buildings in other cities, at least in the outlying neighborhoods of those cities. You wouldn't find this in a downtown area, but notice that it's commercial on the ground floor, residential above, and a lot of detailing. This particular notice the zigzag patterns, for instance, very common on Art Deco architecture, and also notice the elaborate decorative element, which at the same time is both tropical and suggestive of a frozen fountain. Another very common element in Art Deco architecture everywhere. Even our theaters are small by comparison to theaters in the rest of the country, but nonetheless beautifully decorated inside and out. And our commercial buildings along Lincoln Road also reflect the same kind of geometry, perhaps a little more elaborate, because they are commercial buildings after all, and they have to attract people. So they are typically, the commercial buildings are typically more decorative than the hotels and the residential buildings. Later on, Lincoln Road was made into a pedestrian mall by the famous architect Lapidus. And we'll talk a little bit more about him later. But the buildings are along Lincoln Road are still largely Art Deco buildings. We also had a library in Miami Beach, which is now the home of the Bass Museum, but originally built as a library and built in 1930, and therefore more reflective of the detailing that you see in other early 1930s buildings. Note, for instance, these seagulls in the corners of the building. Quite unique, and again, reflective of the past that we're talking about the seaside, after all. So now, let's move on to my second topic. How is it that Miami Beach became the first city in the world to have an Art Deco preservation movement? Well, after World War II, tourism moved to Middle Beach. New hotels began to be built in the mid-century modern style, what we in Miami call MIMO or Miami Modern. Much larger, more sophisticated, more all-service kinds of hotels began to be built in Mid-Beach. Hotels like the Eden Rock and the Fontainebleau, both of which were designed by Lapidus, but there were many others as well, designed by other architects. These small buildings in South Beach began to deteriorate. They weren't profitable anymore. They became homes. They became very, very cheap housing. Affordable housing before we had the term affordable housing. But very affordable. Very cheap. And many of the people who lived there were Jewish. Some were Holocaust survivors. And the buildings, the building owners were not making a whole lot of money off of those buildings, and so they weren't keeping them up. And the buildings began to deteriorate. Then along came a woman by the name of Barbara Bayer Capitman. Barbara moved to Miami Beach along with her husband William in 1973. They moved from Westchester County, New York. Barbara was a graphic artist. William was an economist and a market researcher. They hadn't been here 2 years before William died in 1975. And Barbara was looking for something to do with her time and her energies. She met Leonard Horowitz, an interior designer and an openly gay man. He had, because of his profession, an interior designer, he had an appreciation for the architecture of the buildings in Miami Beach. And so he took Barbara on a walking tour. And she immediately fell in love with the architecture. But she also was very interested in the people who were living in those buildings. She and Leonard were both Jewish. As I said before, most of the people living there were Jewish. She wanted to improve their living conditions, and she saw the restoration and preservation of these buildings as a way to improve the lives of the people who lived there. And she said as much at the time. And so in 1976, Barbara and Leonard and friends, some of whom were architects, most of whom were young, formed the Miami Design Preservation League. Within 3 years, by 1979, they got the Art Deco district onto the National Register of Historic Places. A phenomenal achievement for a number of reasons. One, it was the largest historic district on the National Register at the time, over 2,000 buildings. So a lot of documentation had to be put together. Two, the buildings were less than 50 years old at the time. This is historic. That's why it's called, officially, the Art Deco Architectural District, rather than the Art Deco Historic District. And getting it put on the National Register required a lot of ear bending, a lot of lobbying, And it was primarily Barbara who did that. And she managed to get it done. So then, a few years later, Barbara and her friends Michael Knurk and Dennis Wilhelm, who were among the founders of the Miami Design Preservation League, they piled into an old broken down car and started traveling around the United States. And I mean all around the United States. And everywhere they went, to all those cities that I mentioned earlier, and other cities as well, everywhere they went, they looked for Art Deco buildings. They also looked for people like Sharon, people who were also interested in Art Deco architecture and in preservation. And they met with those people and told them what was happening in Miami Beach and encouraged them to start their own Art Deco societies. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Sharon for a moment and ask her to reminisce a little bit about Barbara.
Thank you. I was a member of the Art Deco Society in New York. I got, they had these trade shows just like we have now, the Palm Beach Antique Show and the Valentine's Jewelry Show. They had a show in New York, and I picked up 1 million brochures, and one of them was Art Deco New York. And I joined and I volunteered. I lived in Brooklyn, not Manhattan. That was like, whoa, Manhattan. But I went to the meetings and they had antique happy hours. I volunteered. I designed the graphics in a program, and they opened up the Cloud Club in the Chrysler Building. And I was invited to that with a date, and we were on our way to go to the Chrysler Building, the Cloud Club, and they burglarized his business, and we had to make a U-turn, and I was all dressed up for the Cinderella for the ball, and I missed it. And it didn't even work out with him, so that was really good. But another thing in New York, my house was burglarized, my whole family was moving to Florida. I said, nice knowing you, I would never move to Florida. And when my house was burglarized, within 2 weeks I begged them, don't leave me here, I'm coming. And when I lived, like I said, I lived in Brooklyn, and people said, oh, you should live in Manhattan. So when I moved to Florida, I followed my parents, they lived in Westlake, or I moved to Delray. Everyone said, oh, you should live in Miami if you like Art Deco. It was like, I made a joke, I never live in the right place. And then people said, you have to call Barbara Kaufman. And I'm like, hello, my name is Sharon, and people said I should call you. And she said, well, send me $25 membership and I'll talk to you. 36 years ago. So I sent a check, I charged her $35 out. 36 years ago, I sent her $25, and she said, come on down. And I was living with a man at the time, and we went down, and she said, Sharon Koskow, you will start the Art Deco Society of the Palm Beaches. And I'm like, what? I'm a mural artist, I'm a designer. I don't know anything even, I liked Art Deco, but I didn't really know about architecture. And she taught me everything about architecture, about Miami, and around the world. And I met Michael and Dennis. A picture of them is in my book that you should all buy tonight, Art Deco of the Palm Beaches. And I met Leonard. Barbara went to Miami for a conference. I went with them. I stayed with Leonard. We shared a room together. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Unfortunately, Leonard passed away of AIDS right after that. But I was heavily involved in all these people in Miami that were like, oh, have a fashion show. Oh, have a bus trip. Oh, and I just started doing all these things up here. And in fact, we had to discover all these buildings. When the Armory Art Center was going to be demolished in 3 weeks, they had $85,000 towards the demolition of this building. The Norton Gallery and School of Art kicked out their school. Oh, we don't want a school anymore, it's too much trouble. So there were all these instructors and artists, and a few blocks away from the Norton, they found this building. Oh, we'll turn this into an art center. So I remember coming to look at it. It was all black and moldy. And I said, Gay Wolf at the time was my friend. She was president of the Norton Artists Guild, and I was the vice president of the Norton Museum of Art and Artists Guild. Anyway, I said, I think this building is Art Deco. This building. And I'll never forget. She goes, oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I think nobody wanted to be Art Deco. And I had to discover all the buildings in Palm Beach County, literally drive through the streets, because it's not a concentration like Miami. Our buildings here are even more rare and more endangered, because if someone tore this one building down, you wouldn't say, oh, you killed the neighborhood. If you tear down a hotel in South Beach, it's like, oh, the neighborhood, So I had to discover everything. We had to, I'd go back to Barbara Kaplan and go, is this what you mean? Because, I was used to New York Art Deco, which is vertical and streamlined, and not streamlined, these vertical skyscrapers. Here in Florida, with the flat land, our buildings tend to be horizontal like a boat. But I go to Barbara and goes, is this Art Deco? And she goes, oh yeah, that's streamlined modern, that's our favorite kind. So technically, our buildings here in Palm Beach County are streamlined modern. We just call everything Art Deco from 1925 to 1939, which ended because of the war. The factories, everything was World War II. But you could call it nautical deco, or streamlined modern, or depression modern. As John talked about, right after Art Deco, we never talk about that here. We're going to start talking about mid-century modern. Because those buildings are now more than 50 years old, and they're historic. In Florida, our buildings, our oldest buildings, are Art Deco. We don't have buildings 300 years old, go to Europe, 600 years old. This is our history. And even though you might be snowbirds and live other places, history matters. And Florida's history really matters. So we discovered all these buildings, and we started the Art Deco Society. From day one, we were doing bus trips to Miami. So I learned how to do bus trips and walking tours, and it turns out when we have these Art Deco World Congresses, we meet all the other people. And they're all doing these bus trips and walking tours and educational things. So when we go to Miami, though, everyone loves it. They had their honeymoon there, right? Everybody has memories of growing up in Miami and the hotels there. We just didn't know they were special. We knew they were special, but we didn't know that there was this cohesive name called Art Deco. Art Deco started at the 1925 International Exposition des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels, Arts Décoratifs. And in 1968, they looked back and said, let's just call everything Art Deco. That was modern, right? That word modern. So now, in the 50s and 60s, we're having this World Congress come here, and I'm going to be talking all about this next Art Deco Second Wednesday is March 8th. But I go and I discover, because the bus is going to come up from Miami, the bus will be all week. Wait, let's start again. The bus will go, the tour will start in Orlando. And they're going to go to Bach Tower and what's the name of that historic center?
The Maitland Art and History Museum.
Then they'll come to Miami.
I'll be talking about that shortly.
Right, a week of lectures, and then they'll come to the Palm Beaches. So I needed, when they come up in the bus, the first stop. Many of you went on a bus trip to WMODA, Wiener Museum of Decorative Arts. Well, it was all set, but now they're moving. They have a new home, they've secured a new home. That is the most incredible museum right here in Broward of decorative Art Nouveau and Art Deco ceramics and glass.
Do they have a new home yet?
They just got the home. They didn't open it. It will be about 4 to 6 months.
Oh.
But they have acquired a space. It's unbelievably wonderful. Anyway, so we needed a place. The Boca Raton Historic Society said, why don't you go to Lynn University? They have some interesting architecture there. And oh my God, is fabulous. If you're a photographer of architecture, it's a delight. This mid-century modern, it's not a revolt against Art Deco, it's Art Deco enhanced. It's all the geometric, and it's concrete, it's all the technology. And it's something called brise soleil, or a concrete curtain, where there's geometrical shapes and the sun filters through and creates patterns, and it's fascinating. We're going to have a walking tour March 31st, which I'll have, you'll be able to sign up, of Lynn University in Boca Raton, mid-century modern architecture. And the tour, the lecture next month, Art Deco Sigma will reflect. I'll show you all the pictures of the mid-century modern, and then we're going to go to IBM headquarters. It's now called BRIC, Boca Raton Innovative Complex. That was built by Bauhaus architect Marcel Breuer.
Yeah.
And we'll have lunch. It's a place called Marcel Brewery, a coffee shop. So we've all heard of Marcel Breuer as this architect. He designed that Cheska chair, the cane-back tubular chair. Well, he designed a building in Boca Raton. I had no idea. Growing up, I loved Bauhaus. Bauhaus is this modern design, form follows function, Corbusier, all these famous architects. And we have it right here in Boca Raton. I always would say there's no Art Deco in Boca Raton. Well, there's mid-century modern, and we're going to see it on the walking tour and next month's slides. Back to Jack.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we talked about the tour of the United States that Barbara and Michael and Dennis did, and how they helped to promote the preservation of Art Deco buildings in all the cities that they visited. Barbara unfortunately died in 1990. As Sharon mentioned, Leonard had died of AIDS in 1989. Barbara had started work on a book about that tour around the United States. And she had not completed it. So it was left to Michael and Dennis to complete the book, which was finally published in 1994.
Her first book was published, though.
Her first book had been published earlier, and it concentrated on Miami Beach. Yeah. Both books are available on Amazon, or occasionally they're resold, but neither one is still in print.
Really?
In print.
And Art Deco of the Palm Beaches is listed in the second book, Art Deco USA.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's called Rediscovering Art Deco, a Nationwide Tour of Architectural Delights. Let's go on to now to talk about the World Congress on Art Deco. The first World Congress was held in Miami Beach in 1991.
I was there.
Sharon was there. As Sharon said, it was Barbara's brainchild to have these World Congresses. Unfortunately, she died in 1990, so she didn't see it happen. But her friends and fellow board members and fellow volunteers made it happen. And since then, the World Congress has been held in different cities around the world every 2 years. The last World Congress was in Buenos Aires in 2019. As Sharon said, it was supposed to have happened in Singapore in 2021, but it was canceled due to COVID. So we will be the first World Congress to happen in 4 years. A lot of the people who come to World Congresses come to World Congress after World Congress after World Congress. And they've formed friendships that are renewed every 2 years. And so they enjoy getting together every 2 years in a different city, learning about and seeing and exploring Art Deco and other built forms of architecture around the world. And so we will be hosting the World Congress, the 16th World Congress, in April of this year, which will make Miami Beach the first city to host the World Congress twice. Fitting, because we were the first to have it in the first place. Let's see, I have here this is our website, www.16thworldcongressonartdeco.com. If you go to that website, you will be able to see everything you need to know about the World Congress. You'll be able to see the itinerary, which is subject to change, but we've been working on it for 3 years now, so it's pretty solid. And you'll be able to sign up for the World Congress. So I'd like now to quickly go through with you the itinerary for the World Congress and let you know what's going to happen day by day during the World Congress. As Sharon mentioned, the World Congress will begin in Central Florida. We call it a pre-Congress. The pre-Congress will be April 18th to the 20th. April the 18th is Arrival Day. On the 19th, we will start bright and early in the morning, and we will visit Florida Southern College. You may never have heard of Florida Southern College. But it's an extraordinary collection of buildings, many of which were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous, probably the most famous American architect. Wright had an Art Deco period. Barbara used to say that Frank Lloyd Wright was the world's first Art Deco architect. Most Frank Lloyd Wright fans disagree with that, but they're wrong. And Florida Southern College, the campus layout and many of the buildings were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, others by his students. This is the chapel. Here's another building, very clearly reminiscent of what we now call Art Deco architecture. From there, we are going to...
Sorry, where is that located? Lakeland.
Lakeland.
Oh, yes, it's in Lakeland. It's in Lakeland, Florida.
No, it's Central Florida, Lakeland, Florida.
Right.
Tampa and Orlando.
It's west of Orlando, yes. Okay. Then we're going to have lunch at the Terrace Hotel in Lakeland, a historic building which is in the Mediterranean style. And we're going to go to the Maitland Art and History Museum, an extraordinary collection of small buildings, all of which were built in the Mayan Deco style. And we're going to tour all those buildings As you can see, it's the decorations on the building are quite elaborate, really extraordinarily beautiful. The thing to remember about Art Deco architecture, one of the many things to remember about Art Deco architecture, is that there were lots of archaeological discoveries being made in the 1920s and 30s. And so you'll see buildings and decorative elements on buildings that are reflective of Egyptian and Mayan architecture and design. This particular site is one of the most extraordinary collections of Mayan Deco design to be found anywhere in the world. We will then start heading south, and we will stop at the beautiful Bok Tower and Gardens. For those of you who haven't been there, you must go, and I hope you'll go with us. This is the Bok Tower up close, and now you can see why it's on an Art Deco World Congress tour. We'll have lunch there. This is we're on the second day now of the World Congress, of the pre-Congress, I should say. Then we will drive through Opa-locka, Florida. Opa-locka is not Art Deco. It's, however, an extraordinary collection of buildings designed in a Middle Eastern style. That was the intention of the founder of Opa-locka, that all the buildings would be in a sort of a Moroccan architectural style. The city today doesn't reflect that entirely, but a lot of those original buildings are still there. So we're gonna drive. We're gonna just do a bus tour, a quick bus tour through Opa-locka on our way to Miami Beach. I don't have any pictures of it because I haven't been there yet. But
I've been there. We did a fashion show, Barbara and I.
Okay, great. So we're all going to learn about Opa-locka at the same time. And then we'll arrive in Miami Beach. We'll arrive in Miami Beach that afternoon. And that evening, we will have our opening reception at the Art Deco Welcome Center on Ocean Drive in Miami Beach, which, as you can see, has recently had a historic monument to Barbara Bear Capitman erected right outside the Art Deco Welcome Center.
Is that where they give the Art Deco walking tours?
That's where the walking tours begin, yes. Every day at 10:30 a.m. We have walking tours that begin from the Art Deco Welcome Center, which is at the end of 10th Street and Ocean Drive.
Which is called Barbara Capitman Way. And 11th Street is called Leonard Horowitz Way.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to have at the reception lots of hors d'oeuvres and a 2-hour performance by a string quartet from the New World Symphony. And it's all going to be 1930s music. They're going to play about a half hour of 1930s classical music, followed by about a half hour of 1930s popular music, followed by about an hour of dance music from the 1930s. Because a lot of the people who come to these World Congresses like, number one, to dress in the Art Deco style, and number two, to dance in the Art Deco style. So it'll be a very fun evening. The next day, we will begin the World Congress in earnest. All of our meetings and lectures will be held at the Jewish Museum, an extraordinary converted Jewish synagogue built in the 1930s in the Art Deco style, with a lot of Art Deco detailing and a lot of references to Jewish architecture. And then we will have a tour which has been developed specifically for the World Congress called Hidden in Plain Sight. It will visit a lot of buildings on Ocean Drive and Washington Avenue and Collins Avenue that some of you may be familiar with. And it will talk about the details of those buildings, where the name of the building came from, what particular decorative elements we're trying to say, where they came from, things like this. Notice on the facade of the building, the pelican, again, a reference to the seaside. So that'll be an interesting walking tour. And then we're going to have a tour of Collins Avenue and Collins Park later on in the World Congress. We're also going to visit the Lapidus Historic District. I mentioned earlier our first historic district, which is the one that most people are familiar with. We now have, I believe it's 15 historic districts in Miami Beach. And this one honors the legacy of Morris Lapidus. The Eden Rock, the Fontainebleau, and other buildings of his. This is the lobby of the famous lobby of the Eden Rock Hotel, with its famous Stairway to Nowhere.
Fountain Blue.
Pardon me?
Fountain Blue.
Fountain Blue, excuse me. Next door to the Eden Rock, yes.
It's the Morris Lapidus bow tie.
That's right. That's where the Lapidus always wore bow ties, and so he designed the floor of this hotel with bow tie shapes. And the Stairway to Nowhere was there primarily for grand entrances, and that's all. It really did practically go nowhere. We'll have a tour of single-family homes. We have some extraordinary Art Deco single-family homes in Miami Beach. We will, at the end of the day, on I'm moving around the schedule here, but at the end of that of the first full day, we will be going to North Miami, and in North Miami we will visit their galleries, including one gallery which in particular has an extraordinary collection of Art Deco objects. High-end Art Deco objects. I mean, thousands of dollars each. But it's truly a wonderful place to visit. We'll be visiting art galleries there as well. We'll have entertainment from the local children and a local dance group. And we'll have an outdoor dinner served by the people of North Miami. We'll have a day-long tour, actually a day and a half of tours of sites in Miami Beach. Again, we'll be emphasizing not just Art Deco architecture, but also Miami modern architecture. I neglected to mention earlier that our theme is Modernism, Florida's Hidden Treasures. We're trying to convince Art Deco fans that there's more great architecture than just Art Deco. And so we're going to show them our wonderful Miami modern architecture, as well as our wonderful Art Deco architecture. This is a picture of the Vagabond Hotel, which we will be touring as part of our Miami tour. We'll go to what's it called? Can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it's
MIMO, your concrete curve.
yeah, it's definitely MIMO. I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head now. But anyway, it's an extraordinary MIMO building, which was one of the places that black artists and black performers stayed when they came to Miami Beach, because they weren't allowed to stay in Miami Beach.
That's the hotel where the movie was, the fighter.
That's right. If you've seen the movie One Night in Miami.
One night.
One Night in Miami.
One night
Yes.
in Miami. This will be the hotel where it was shot. What was the name of the fighter?
Muhammad Ali. That's right.
Clay.
Yes.
Yeah, if you saw that movie, they're going to go to the hotel where they filmed the movie.
Yeah.
And it actually happened.
That's right. It happened the night that he became world champion for the first time. And it also is a place where Martin Luther King stayed many times when he came to Miami. As a matter of fact, he delivered an early draft of his I Have a Dream speech in this hotel. So it's a hotel that's rich with history, and we'll be taking a tour of this hotel. This is inside the lobby of the hotel. Really extraordinary decorative elements. We'll also visit the Scottish Rite Temple in Miami. Possibly the earliest pre-Deco building in Miami, built in 1923, and we will visit it outside and inside. We will have a tour of the interior of the building as well, and it's really quite extraordinary. We will see 3 downtown office buildings in Miami, and their extraordinary architecture. We will go to the Miami City Hall, which was built originally as the Pan Am Airways terminal in Miami. It's right by the ocean, right by the bay, I should say, right by Biscayne Bay, because at the time, American Airlines used only seaplanes. And it has some extraordinary architectural references to to the world and to the Americas and to American Airlines in its interiors. We'll visit the Coral Gables Museum, the Coral Gables Women's Club, which has this extraordinary fountain in front of it. Again, a reference to the seaside nature of our community. We will visit, of course, the Versace house, which is actually, the original name was Casa Casuarina. It was built in 1930.
Mediterranean Revival, not Art Deco.
Yes, Mediterranean Revival, yes. And you can see that in the form of the building and in the decorative elements of the building. Notice the sloping barrel tile roofs, the fact that the building is asymmetrical. Those are common characteristics, and also the arched openings over the windows and doors. Those are all common characteristics of the Mediterranean Revival style. Here's the front entrance, surrounded by Keystone. Keystone is so called because it comes from the Florida Keys. It's dead coral rock is what it is. There is a quarry in the Florida Keys, which you can still visit today, which is one of the sources of Keystone, which was used extensively in Miami Beach buildings, both Mediterranean Revival buildings and Art Deco buildings. Not only will we see the outside of Casa Casuarina, we will also see the extraordinary interior. This courtyard is typical of a Mediterranean palazzo, but a great rarity in the United States. We'll also be having a dinner at the gourmet restaurant, a lunch, I should say, at the gourmet restaurant here at the Versace house. The interiors are mostly Versace's interiors, and they have been preserved, and we will be going through the home and looking at them. This, of course, is the Medusa medallion. The Medusa was the logo of the Versace company. And it has these extraordinary medallions along the top floor of the building. This is not Versace. This was designed as part of the original building in 1930. We'll have, of course, dinner at Joe's Stone Crab. We'll have a tour of the multifamily apartment buildings in the Flamingo Park Historic District, just west of Washington Avenue. We'll see some extraordinary multifamily buildings as part of that tour. We'll spend a half day at the Wilsonian Museum, and we will have many other parties and lunches and dinners, including a dinner at the Amara restaurant. The Amara restaurant, a lunch, I should say, at the Amara restaurant, which is in Miami. It'll be the day of the full-day Miami tour. We'll be stopping there for lunch. It's an extraordinarily good restaurant, and it's right on Biscayne Bay. So we'll be on the rooftop overlooking Biscayne Bay, and we'll see Miami Beach in the distance. So we've got lots of good stuff planned for you, and you can see it all at the website. Just click on the itinerary icon at the top of the homepage, and you'll see the itinerary. And once we've done all that, that'll be 7 days in Miami Beach. We will come to Delray Beach. So I will turn it over again to Sharon. Again, we call this the Post-Congress. The Post-Congress will be from the 28th to the 30th. And so
What's the most important thing is that April 28th, the Post-Congress, is World Art Deco Day.
Oh my goodness.
So even from all around the world, the people who won't be coming to the Congress will be celebrating April 28th, World Art Deco Day, all over the world. And where is it in 2023? Here in the Palm Beaches.
And April 28th
Right.
was the day of the opening of the International Exposition in Paris in 1925, which popularized the Art Deco style all over Europe.
That's what started
And
Art Deco.
It was during the heyday of colonialism. So what became popular in Europe became popular all over the world, which is why Art Deco is the world's first truly universal architectural style.
That's true.
So speaking of colonialism, we'll be staying at the Colony Hotel.
This is not an Art Deco hotel, but it is on the National Trust for Historic Preservation Registry. And you don't have to stay at a hotel because you live here. So if you decided to come, you wouldn't have to pay for the airfare that the Australians are going to have to pay and travel 24 hours, time change and all that. If you come, you stay here. But everything will be leaving in Palm Beach. We will be starting at the Colony Hotel. And we're also working with the Hyatt Hotel and the Aloft
What is
Hotel.
the style of that hotel?
That's in downtown Delray Beach,
Yeah, I know.
Florida.
What's the style?
The Colony Hotel.
The style.
Oh, that's Mediterranean Revival,
Oh,
Spanish.
Spanish.
Palm Beach County, Boca Raton, I always go say there's no Art Deco in Boca Raton. It's an Addison Meisner style, the Spanish style, the barrel tile roof. Recently they painted it yellow because yellow, when we talk about color theory, yellow has been the color for the last 20 years. And it has been repainted in this beautiful golden yellow about 20 years ago. It is downtown Delray, and that'll be the headquarters for our conference.
Most of the visitors are architects.
No, most of them are just people who love Art Deco, but they are architects, designers, photographers, artists, jewelry designers. We have Stephen back here. His mother was an Art Deco artist. So people have all kinds of interests.
Muralists.
Many are architects, but no, not all architects.
How many people?
How many people? Well, this is a very good question. We're having a late sign up because of COVID, because of inflation. People have already been to Florida. They haven't seen the new Florida. Many people have not been to Florida. But we do have wonderful sunny weather. So there's reasons why people will be coming in. Registration is just beginning now. Again, World Art Deco Day is going to be in Palm Beach.
We're expecting
Mr. Beal has COVID.
we're expecting about 150 people for the World Congress. We've limited it to no more than 200 because some of our venues won't accommodate more than that. We've limited the pre-Congress and the post-Congress to 100 people for the same
Which is
reason.
2 buses. Mrs. Bielsom, who couldn't be here tonight, you will, we recognize her, but she has COVID and sends her regards. And we won't be going inside the house, we will be turning the outside of the house. And of course, the Norton Gallery and School of Art. This is the Olive Avenue entrance, the old entrance, with Diana and Actia, which are Paul Manship sculptures. You can drive by and see them any time. But we will be going there for Art After Dark. And the exhibit that will be at the Norton Museum is early 20th century American modernism. The word modernism is actually in the title of the exhibit that will be their blockbuster exhibit, again, straight from the Whitney Museum in April at the Norton. Who built the Whitney Museum? Marcel Breuer, who built the IBM. You know, and all these connections are really amazing. But we'll be going there to Art After Dark, then coming back. This is World Art Deco, then coming back to Delray for an Egyptian soiree to celebrate the beginning of Art Deco with its Egyptian influence. And for those of you who were invited to my 65th Egyptian soiree birthday party, where it rained all night. But we're having another Egyptian soiree. Costumes required, yes. And the Colony Hotel has a beach resort. And I believe that's a picture. Oh, no.
That was like
That's where the Egyptian soiree is.
211.
That was so little.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where the Egyptian soiree will be, in Delray. It's closed to only people who are invited. Okay, this is the Boyd Building in Delray, where Deck 32, the restaurant, is on the Intracoastal. It's an Art Deco building. And even though it's just peach with white, I designed that 30 years ago when they freaked out. Peach? In Delray? Oh my God. And I had a little green on there, they running away. But it's still, and it's faded because it was a very pale peach. But I actually designed those colors 30 years ago, following in the steps of Leonard Horowitz, who was, you know, painting up Miami. They just couldn't handle the peach with the white Art Deco elements emphasized. And we'll be going to the Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens, which I just drove Jack past by tonight. And you know, whether you come to the World Congress or not, I encourage you to visit our art and culture. Why? What makes Miami different? The hotels. What's unique about Palm Beach County Art Deco? Our cultural and arts institutions are in Art Deco buildings. I just happen to be an artist. The Lake Worth Theater, the Lake Worth Playhouse. I designed the marquee in 2009. This is what it used to look like before a hurricane, September 16, 1928. It was what we call Moorish deco. It had an Arabian influence. Then they had the flat roof and the geometry, the very symmetrical building. And I highlighted it with neon and created a triangular sign and an Art Deco sign for the Lake Worth Playhouse in 2009. And that's what influenced the Publix in downtown Lake Worth. When Publix said we want to build an Art Deco, no, they said we want to build a Publix. The commissioner said we want it to be Art Deco, not Mediterranean Revival. They went back 3 weeks, they came with Art Deco plans for the Publix in Lake Worth. And
That's this building.
what building is that one?
Oh no, the cultural center.
There you go, the Cultural Council in Lake Worth. Everything in Art Deco was threes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I say that all the time. When I spoke in France, I went rue du toit. This is the inside. This is not Art Deco. This is 1980 Tom Otternish. Although it does have a fluted ribbon. This is called Battle of the Sexes. It's the Cultural Council. It's a free museum. You can go there anytime. And we'll be having that night, April 29th, Saturday dinner in Pan's Garden at the Preservation Foundation. Beachy Restaurant on Worth Avenue, which is across the street, will be bringing in a Worth Avenue dinner. And we'll be stopping, looking at the mural at the Four Arts Society. I went to see the exhibit yesterday, Monday, portraits worth seeing at the Society for Arts Museum. And
That's the.
here we are at the Armory where I painted the building in 1987. And then they painted it all white. We're talking about with our new director, John Sewell, about bringing back some color on the front of the building. So stay tuned, because you know I'm going to be involved in that. And here we are, World Congress, iCads Art Deco. What John didn't tell you is he is a board member of the iCads, and I am secretary of iCads. So we've been having board meetings and Zooming for the past year.
ICADS is the International Coalition of Art Deco Societies.
So, how many are there?
that-
That's a good question.
that-
It's about 25 or 30.
That trip that Barbara and Michael and Dennis took to spread the gospel of Art Deco has resulted now in 29 Art Deco societies around the world, which are members of the International Coalition.
Of which Jack is a board member and I am the secretary. New York, we meet with Australia, India, Mumbai, Paris, Miami, Palm Beach, New York, Virginia, and Washington.
And lots
So
of,
there is-
several societies in Australia.
So we Zoom at 8 a.m. on every other month on a Sunday. For all the time zones. So I want to thank you all for coming. Have a refreshment.